What's up? What's happening on a Monday? It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Craig Hoffman, happy to be with you, and I'm not going to lie to you, I really wanted to start the show with Steph Curry, but I will save it for later so we can talk NFL draft. I just wanted to come out like Curry did, shots firing, going nuts, being legendary, but alas, I will simply ask at 6:30 today if he's the top 10 all-time NBA player, and I was surprised at how easily the answer was the answer. I'll leave that there for now and ask a different question instead. Will everyone start believing Ron Rivera now? Of course, the NFL draft concluding over the weekend, and Ron Rivera and the Commanders did exactly what Ron Rivera and the Commanders have either been publicly or privately hinting at for months. Since January, they continue to marginally improve this team because they think that they're close. That is not nuts in terms of at least being a playoff caliber double-digit win team. And they think that continuing to improve on the margins and the growth of players internally is enough to get where they want to go. And that does not include a need at quarterback. That does not include a need at tight end. It doesn't mean doing something crazy to get something in the short term that has a big, giant upside. And they executed their game plan extremely well this weekend. I think there is valid questions on parts of the game plan. I think there are valid questions on parts of the execution. But I want to, for a moment, just simply say to all the national folks who keep insisting that they need a quarterback. And I feel good saying this, even though we have a national folk coming on at 5 o'clock in Matt Miller from ESPN, longtime Bleacher Report and The Athletic and some other places that he's done his draft coverage over the years. The NFL Draft Scout is him on Twitter and his website. But even though we're going to get some national perspective, because Matt knows the draft as well as anyone and knows the prospects, and he can talk about the execution, I'm tired of hearing national folks poop on the plan. Not because I think that it is guaranteed that Ron Rivera has got a masterpiece on his hands and that Sam Howell is going to be great and that, you know, they've got it all figured out. But because there isn't a better one. And sinking or swimming with the current plan is the best thing for the franchise. And anything that tries to shortcut that is a bad idea. And so I am thrilled that they didn't do something crazy and take Hendon Hooker at 16 or even at 47. I guess he was even available at 47. I don't think he was even available at 47 anymore. But they didn't trade up and do something wild. They didn't, take Dalton Kincaid at 16. They didn't do the things that people who don't follow this football team apparently very closely think that they should do. And that's good. They're not succumbing to outside pressure. And again, I agree with the path that they're on. And I will simply go back to two things when it comes to specifically the quarterback position. One, if Sam Howell was in this year's class, a lot of analysts, the same ones that people scream about who didn't necessarily like this player, that player that the Commanders took, so they reached, even though the rest of the NFL might have been exactly where the Commanders were, and just sometimes they're different between the media evals and the team evals. Guys like DeJuan Jones, who teams have more information on. There's a reason he fell. All of those kinds of guys. If you had asked, where does Sam Howell go in this year's class, some of them would have had him just behind Bryce Young. Mike Renner told us as much on Take Command, formerly of Pro Football Focus, now with Bleacher Report, did their draft show. Like Mike's like, yeah, I would have put him right in the top. Like maybe behind Young, maybe behind Stroud, but he was Sam Howell was his QB1 in last year's class, ahead of Pickett, ahead of Malik Willis, ahead of all of them. So why would you take a quarterback essentially 2 years in a row if you feel like you got a second rounder last year? Secondly, Jacoby Brissett was, by some metrics, a top 10 quarterback in the freaking league last year. The idea that they now needed to go spend their first or second round pick on a quarterback in a bad quarterback class, I should say in a mediocre quarterback class, when they could easily just support that guy and fill other holes that they need with quality players because their class was deep elsewhere, specifically at, defensive back where they spent their first 2 picks, doesn't make any sense. So, while, yes, I do have questions about Braden Daniels and his ability to play tackle based off of some evals and, talking through it with Logan and, all that kind of stuff. Do I have questions about the intelligence of taking 2 edge players, for instance, this year, even if I kind of like both guys? Sure, you could always poke holes. Could you complain that they didn't more solidly address tackle? Yes, I think that's fair. I still think the O-line depth is a major question. But what they did was smart. They're a better team now than they were last Thursday. They will continue to get better through the next wave of free agency. They're going to have to make some moves in order to do that because they need to create the cap space to sign the next Charles Leno, whether that is to replace Charles Leno or to upgrade elsewhere on the line, ideally at left guard. But we also need to stop this revisionist history of what last year was. Last year, look, it was real bad to start. I remember distinctly after the Tennessee game, sitting down for Take Command to record our post-game pod with Logan with a beer in my hand, cracking it and proclaiming, this is a bad football team. And you know what they did from there? They finally benched Carson Wentz against their will because they had to because of injury. They instantly got better because Wentz was an enormous problem. They fired the offensive coordinator that was also an enormous problem. And they're going to get Chase Young back. Jamin Davis is a completely different player now than he was going into last year. And you've got other guys who will continue to grow internally. And if healthy, a guy like Benjamin St-Juste could be game changers. At that point, you're playing the same game that everyone else is in the NFL. You're hoping your key guys stay healthy and that your stars produce. And if they do, it's a 10-win, 11-win football team. And if they don't, either they don't produce, and that could be a miss on the eval or whatever other injury, obviously, then they're going to be bad. And if they're bad, then they'll fire the coach with the new owner. They'll be in the Drake May, Caleb Williams sweepstakes at the top of the draft next year. And that's also a good place to be. So I don't know why it got to me so much this weekend, why I'm starting the show a little bit agitated, irritated today. But whether it's fans who I feel like were on one this weekend in a way that this fan base hasn't been in a while, or national pundits who think this team is the worst team in football and is run by a bunch of idiots. I'm not telling you that they got the best coaching staff and the best front office in the league, but I literally don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what more you want outside of them picking the guy that you think, in your opinion, is better when it's their job to know. And that's not to say we can't question them ever. It's not to say we can't question them often. It's not to say we can't ponder and poke holes and that everything they did was perfect. But on the whole, they get like a B from me for the weekend. There wasn't an A necessarily to be gotten either. And I think sometimes that's the reality that we also need to face. The league is not something that you control as a team. You have to get lucky. You have to have the circumstances present themselves to you to take advantage of. They missed in 2020 on Justin Herbert. That was a self-own, if you will. Full failing marks on that one, especially considering how Chase's career has played out so far. But you can't downgrade them for taking Emmanuel Forbes because they didn't trade down when there was no one to trade down with. You can't downgrade them for Jartavius Martin, for Quan Martin, because you like a tackle from Ohio State better who is still available by, I think, the 4th round. because of real legitimate questions about his ability to produce at the next level when Quan Martin was the best player left on their board. It's their jobs to know. And the thing that I think is artistically beautiful about the plan the way it is if it fails, then we know. If it succeeds, then it's successful. And either way, that is a proper step forward for this franchise. And it doesn't involve a little bit of emotional disassociation to be able to accept the failure is ultimately a good thing long term. And is that very fun as a fan? Yes and no. But that's where we are. That's where we are. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. We are streaming live as well on YouTube. You can watch youtube.com/@theteam980. Matt Miller is going to join us at 5 o'clock from ESPN. Michael Phillips at 5:30. We're talking hoops in the 6 o'clock hour, but we continue with our draft talk next as we hear from Ron Rivera, Martin Mayhew, what they said about their draft over the weekend. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, and we're also streaming live as well on the free Odyssey app. The Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app, YouTube too, youtube.com/@theteam980. Make sure you are subscribed if you are watching right now. Get a nice little live alert every time the show starts. Make it nice and easy to click on when you are ready to watch. So, obviously, NFL Draft this weekend. Ron Rivera and company get their guys, and I think that's important, right? You got to know what you want for your team, and that's another thing about kind of the national conversation around not just the Commanders draft, but about all these picks, right? You know, Anthony, we were texting earlier this morning, and I was explaining this to you as well, the way that teams actually operate. It's like you have to have an understanding about the consensus board, if you will, right? You want to understand if you like a player a lot more than everyone else because you probably can trade down or potentially could trade down and still get that player. You know, New England allegedly knew that Washington really liked Forbes and was going to take Forbes over Gonzalez, so they felt comfortable trading back to 17 and weren't scared that the Commanders are going to get their guy. But what that doesn't mean is that the Washington should have taken Gonzalez. Like, at the end of the day, they're drafting for the Commanders. You're not drafting on a consensus big board. You're not drafting on, Mel Kiper's ratings, Todd McShay's ratings, Matt Miller's ratings, anybody. Doesn't mean those guys don't know what they're doing, but they're putting together kind of a scheme agnostic list of players. Well, if you've got a guy 30 spots higher in a scheme, and he's coming out of a scheme that doesn't translate to yours, and you don't think he will translate, it doesn't matter. That guy's going to suck for you, and you shouldn't take him. And you should take the guy who's good for you. And I don't know, man. Like, I just felt like Twitter was super negative, and Twitter can be super negative, and maybe I should get off Twitter more is often the reaction. But even reading some of the draft recaps, a lot of experts hated the Commanders draft, and I think they hated it because they took guys who they didn't necessarily like, but that are actually, for the most part, good fits for Washington.
Yeah, and basically what you're getting at from our conversation was more so I had asked you about whether the Commanders were drafting for team need or we were taking the best player available type of thing. And part of the reason I asked that question was because of our second-round pick. And I'm not mad about the pick, but it was more so everyone thought we were going line in the offensive line in the second round, and we end up taking another DB. When our offense the last couple of years hasn't been all that good. Our defense has played solid, and we do need to shore up some things, but offense, is something that we need to prioritize a little bit more. So I think that's more so what I was getting at in our conversation.
And to that point, right? So Cody Mott goes the pick right after Washington.
Yep.
So my guess is what happened is there's a cutoff, right? And the last player that was in, let's call it tier 3, because I don't know how exactly they draw their lines or exactly where their board was, right? Every team does it a little bit different. Some guys will have like a tier for the super, super high players, and other teams will more lump like, okay, we understand this guy's the best, but he's in tier 1 with the guy that's also 12th, right? So let's say that it was tier 3. I get the sense that like Quan Martin was like that, and then the next tier down was guys like Mock and the rest of the O-linemen that were available. And even if you were to theoretically favor a position over another, so let's say they did favor O-line. I don't think this is true, which is another part of this discussion. But let's say they did favor O-line over DB. If you have a tier 3 DB and a tier 4 offensive lineman, you take the tier 3 DB because he's inarguably a better player. You factored that into your rankings. That said, they were targeting Quan Martin. It was the guy that they wanted the whole time. Forbes is who they wanted in the first round. Martin's who they wanted in the second round. They definitively think they have a problem in their secondary. And I don't think they're wrong. Like, Benjamin St. Juste is really unreliable. And I feel bad for BSJ because he seems like a great dude, and I'm sure he works really hard, and that injuries happen in football, but they happen to him more often than other players so far in his NFL career. He also is a player, despite how well he played last year, especially after he kicked outside, that has 0 career interceptions and had 0 career interceptions in college. Kendall Fuller, their most productive in terms of interceptions player, is a potential casualty situation. They felt like they could upgrade there, even though he was probably their best corner last year and certainly their most productive again on the turnover front. But as they look to extend Cam Curl and they look to eventually work with Montez's contract or Chase's or whoever they pick next year, they've got a need there in the future. And then on the inside, like, Danny Johnson's your current starting nickel. I love Danny. Not as my starter. So the idea that they, and then you flip it over to the offensive line, they have a hole at left guard. That is a problem. Unless Chris Paul is all of a sudden that kind of develops into the potential that a lot of people think he can, which is pretty good, right? Like, they think his talent is like Pro Bowl type of level if he can put it together. Unlikely he puts it together to that level, but he's in the mix, right? To start for them. And they could still potentially get someone in the next wave of free agency. But outside of that, here's what I just don't think people nationally and even locally fans will accept is that they like their O-line. They don't necessarily love it, but they like it, and they're not crazy to. Part of the reason Leno was bad last year was because they had extreme inconsistency at center, a bad quarterback in terms of protection in Wentz, and the guy playing next to him was a rotating carousel of bad play. Like, Norwell is the one guy that Ron keeps forgetting, talking about in the left guard battle, even though he's still on the roster. He's gone very soon. And so if you get a better left guard next to Leno, he's going to play better. If you have a quarterback who actually gets the ball out of his hands and gets the proper line calls, Leno's going to look better. And you have a better scheme that knows how to protect and insulate offensive linemen, which Scott Turner didn't think mattered, apparently, based off of the scheme of the last couple of years. He's going to be better. They needed a center. They got one in Stromberg. Gates is also a guy who's played center and at a decent level in the NFL and should continue to get better because he's still kind of young and is farther removed now from his injuries. Right guard Cosme better be like an all-pro level guard. I mean, maybe not all-pro, but Pro Bowl level. Because if not, why the hell did you move him inside? And then right tackle, again, I don't know how to tell people this because a couple of analysts think that Andrew Wiley was a better left guard. Doesn't mean that his offensive coordinator, who's coached him in 3 of the last 5 Super Bowls, doesn't know better than you. Bieniemy targeted and signed off on Andrew Wiley playing right tackle. Again, that doesn't mean that he can't kick inside and guard if they were to find a better option. But they are fine with that, and Eric Bieniemy knows how to call plays to take care of Andrew Wiley. I think Scott Turner broke people's brains. They don't realize what scheme can do for players. And then at tight end, all they were going to do is draft a guy that has the same traits as the guys that they have. Why not see if Armani Rogers, Cole Turner, Curtis Hodges, all these dudes can, you need one of those 3 to pan out to pair with Logan Thomas. And if he's turns out that he's great, back off the ACL. And if he's not, you cut him and you move on and you save the cap space. And John Bates is a really, really excellent blocking tight end. Like, Bates is kind of, in his spot. But Hodges, Turner, and Rogers have oodles of potential. So what are you going to do? Draft a guy with the same thing that's a year behind and has all potential? Like, what are we talking about? The tight end thing drove me nuts. Again, if you get a guy who you know is going to be Travis Kelce, sure. But you want to know who didn't know that Travis Kelce was going to be Travis Kelce? The Chiefs. Because they would have drafted him in the first round, not the third. Because he's going to go to the Hall of Fame. It might be the best tight end ever. So, forgive me for thinking that Eric Bieniemy and some health might help this team a little bit. Might. Maybe. Just, I don't know. How do we get back on that tangent? National people and fans who are mad. Am I irritable today, Anthony?
Sounds like you're fed up for sure.
I think it's now May. I just want actual football.
You ain't lying.
I'm ready.
I'm right there with you.
I would like to know At least give me OTAs where we see guys on the field and you go like, oh,
yep.
Oh, maybe this good workout. Oh, look at the ball fly out of Sam Howell's hand. He got a good arm. Oh, that's cool. Well, even though he's short, he didn't throw it to the back of anybody's helmet. Wow. Amazing. We should go to break before I get myself in trouble. What does the DB room look like? We talked about it in Take Command. You'll hear it next.
You can listen.
It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Coming up at the top of the hour, ESPN's Matt Miller crushed it on day 3 of the draft, sitting in with McShay, Kuiper, and everybody on set. Really excited to have Matt on the show, a guy whose work I've followed for a long time. But right now, a little bit of Take Command on a Monday, because we recorded yesterday. We sat down and reviewed everything from the draft. Logan and I went deep on every single pick. Tomorrow, we'll actually have a little bit more for you from this episode, talking about the offensive line. But today, the DBs. Thoughts on Forbes, thoughts on Martin, and thoughts on how it all comes together. That right now, a Take Command Monday here on the Team 980. I think the way we start, even though we already talked a lot.
It's time to take command with former NFL tight end Logan Paulson and former Commanders beat reporter Craig Hoffman.
What's up? What's happening? Welcome in draft review edition of Take Command. He is Logan Paulson. I am Craig Hoffman. And Logan, let us dive right in. We will go through each and every one of the Commanders' picks. We don't have to do like a letter grade per se, but kind of an overall thoughts, grades. We like it, we don't like it on the players selected over the last 3 days. And also, I think with the way we start, even though we already talked a lot about Emmanuel Forbes, I want to be able to put Forbes in context of the rest of the draft now that we've seen it, and also kind of update, because I've watched him more, obviously. Now that we know he's the guy, you spend a little more time on him, you read a little bit more up on him. And I'll say this, at least for me, Logan, like the pick has grown on me tremendously over these last couple of days. The 166 number is the highlight, or not the highlight, is the headline that grabs everyone's attention. But that was his combine weight. And like, if he has the ability to get down to that, to run a 4.3 at the combine, fine. But he ultimately is going to play heavier than that. He probably is already heavier than that. He definitely played heavier than that. And I think the biggest thing for me, Logan, is like flipping on the tape. You go, all right, which ones, if you didn't have like the guy circled, as a lot of the tape breakdowns on YouTube and such do, so you don't find him. You're like, all right, I want you to find Emmanuel Forbes on the field by which one's the skinny guy. You'd have no real shot at doing it. Like, he doesn't look small on tape. And I think, as silly as that is, because we have the number, like that matters a lot. And it tells me that he plays at a bigger weight. The size isn't going to be that huge of an issue. And I think also in the context of seeing them draft Quan Martin to play nickel, like this is their outside corner CB1 of the future. And I think it's a great selection for that, because he's a ball hawk player who the likes they haven't had since at least D'Angelo Hall.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And I think, in the last video, I read some of the comments and some people were like, oh, you guys don't like the pick. Like, I love the pick. I think I said this on the show, like his film is the best of everybody in that top group outside of Witherspoon, right? So he's an excellent football player. He's a physical tackler. He's instinctive. He probably played in the most similar scheme to what Washington plays. A lot of zone. They sprinkle in some man. A lot of coverages where you can play with eyes to the quarterback. Like you mentioned, there's the ball production. I think the ball production is slightly inflated, but I do think it's indicative that he's around the football a lot, right? Has a great recovery speed. So I love the pick. I mean, it's a great pick. Maybe you could argue at 16, could they have got him if they tried to trade back? They probably could have, but I also think they did try to trade back, and it just didn't happen.
100%. And look, I'll say this real quick, Logan. I'm sorry to cut you off, but the Jets very clearly were trying to trade back. They were the pick before. Yeah. Like, they used every bit of their time and took a guy that everyone agreed, it's a good pick, but you really like to trade back. The Jets tried. And if they couldn't trade back at 15, why on earth would the Commanders have been able to at 16? Like, it's not feasible to throw that on them and downgrade them, because they got stuck in their draft slot because there was no one there to trade up for.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think, and so if that's your criticism, I mean, sometimes that happens. Sometimes you just can't move the spot. And I know they tried, and they just weren't able to. And I think, we've talked about this before. If that's your guy, if that's your number one guy at that spot, don't trade back. You know what I mean? Like, if you've tiered that out, he's the number one guy in that tier, don't trade back. And so either way, even if they couldn't, whatever, if that's your number one guy, don't. And so I think you end up with a really good football player and a guy that's going to hopefully make this defense a lot better. Obviously, he's got to come in and play, and we got to see what's going on with that. But every indication of his career, of his film, of his interview that we did with him the other day, he is a guy that's wired appropriately mentally. Football is very important to him. He's played football at a high level for a very long time. I don't want to say it's a surefire thing, but in the grand scheme of surefire picks, it's about as surefire as you get. And the only little asterisk is the 166. And like you said, he played for 4 years in the SEC at a very high level, very physical brand of football, and has no injury history to speak of. Is it 3 years or 4 years? Whatever. It's a long time.
3 years, yeah.
Yeah, whatever it is, long time. So that's what I would say is and he's already bigger. Like in the interview we did on our pre-draft coverage when he came in on Saturday, he already said he's 175. So he's already put on weight. That's probably more close to what he plays at. That's still not a great number, but I think it's a number that you can work with. And I think he's aware. He's a guy that's going to take care of himself and get in the right position. So I like the pick a lot, basically, is the end of that.
Yeah, no, I like it a lot too. And I mean, I'm watching him a little bit over the weekend. you had mentioned he plays a little high sometimes, plays like a little, forward in his back pedal, and you can see that, right? But you also see it get better and kind of his body control get better over time. Like I watched a couple of cut-ups, one of which was against Alabama his freshman year against Devontae Smith. Well, it didn't go great for Emmanuel Forbes
Yeah.
because Devontae Smith was the Heisman Trophy winner and Emmanuel Forbes was a freshman. But you watch then him against Jamison Williams the next year, and it's a lot better.
Yeah.
And you see him then get his play last year in his final year at Mississippi State. And the technique just continues to get refined over time. The athletic, stuff shows off. And even when he does get a little mixed up with some of his footwork, like he's willing to like spin and stuff in space that I don't think is exactly your textbook technique. You don't necessarily want to be spinning with receivers, but he's got the makeup speed that he can get away with some of that stuff. And sometimes you wonder if it's controlled and is he baiting quarterbacks? So he's got to learn if he can do that ever at the NFL level, or is that a part of his game that goes away? He's still going to be around the ball. He's going to get targeted. That's for sure. That's part of being in the NFL. And the question you mentioned, the interception stuff might be a little bit inflated. I'm curious why you say that, but to me, what it says is like, if you give him opportunities, he's going to make plays on the ball. But I'm curious why you say that, why you think that production might be a little bit inflated.
Yeah, I just think like there's some interceptions that are him, like he's making a play. Like there's the play, everyone saw like where he's picking off like a bubble screen that Will Levis
against Kentucky. Yeah.
I mean, it's a great play, anticipates the throw, recognizes formation, all those great things. And there's a couple where it's like, he's breaking on a football and the quarterback, it's college quarterback play, so it's not great. Leaves the ball really inside and basically throws it right to him. Or they're throwing a big out and they underthrow it and he's right there underneath, and like an NFL quarterback probably has the ability to get that over top for a completion. Now, he's not in a bad spot, but like if you go through all eight of his interceptions, I think 6 or 8, whatever it is, even number.
I think it's 6, yeah.
Yeah, if you go through all of them, I'd say 4 or 5 of them are kind of like that, where it's like kind of poor, like there's another one where the quarterback throws the ball behind the receiver is falling down and basically flips it up in the air and it goes right to him, so that's 3 interceptions where it's kind of like, and then there was another one where it's a fake screen. He bites on it, is able to recover, the quarterback underthrows it, and he makes a really nice play on the ball, but if that ball is where it's supposed to be, it's probably a PBU as opposed to an interception. So I think that's kind of what I'm talking about. It's not, again, like he obviously can catch the football well. He's obviously in the right position. He obviously has good vision. He tackles well. But I personally I've always been a believer that interceptions and sacks are not great indicators of production. The statistics go up and down pretty dramatically. So don't be like, oh, he's going to have 6 interceptions here. He's going to be around the football. He's going to put himself in a good position, and he can catch the football if the ball's there. I think that's a better way to look at it.
Yeah, totally. But by the same token, like a bunch of other dudes play in the SEC. There's been hundreds of thousands of FBS players in the history of the sport, and nobody has had more pick sixes than Emmanuel Forbes. And so, those guys were also playing college quarterbacks. Those guys were also doing all this stuff. And so, I think to your point, though, it's just like he makes the most of the opportunities in a way that's better, but there's going to be opportunities that were available to him in college that are not going to be there in the pros. So if you're expecting 10 interceptions out of him in a 17-game season, like let's tamper down your expectations a bit.
Yeah, and I just think like that's a really, you worded that very well. That's exactly what I'm saying. It's not an indictment of him. It's more of an indictment of the media's obsession with these kind of random statistics. And I think, like for sacks, pressure rate is a better indicator. And I think pass breakups are a better indicator for corners. And he's very good in that statistic as well. So it's not like I just don't love those statistics as measures of good cornerback play. I think, who's the DB in Dallas?
Diggs, yeah.
Diggs, he gets a lot of interceptions, but he's also kind of playing the risk-reward game at a very, very high level. And he puts himself in bad spots, and he gives up more yardage than any other DB in the NFL. You're okay with that because he turns the ball over, but is he a top 10 DB because he gives up the most yardage? You know what I'm saying? It's just like it lives in an ecosystem. It's not just one stat. But I love him. I love the pick. I think he's an excellent football player. Really impressed with him as a young man. And you mentioned the Devontae Smith thing. So in the interview, Fred was like, is there somebody you're really looking forward to playing? And I thought he was going to say A.J. Brown, CeeDee Lamb, anybody. I had no idea what he was going to say, but he goes, I want to play Devontae Smith because he scorched our team for 250 yards my freshman year, and I want, like, that's a fluke, and I just love that competitive, like, eagerness, and like the quiet confidence that he had. So in terms of the guy, great guy. In terms of the film, great film. I think it's a great pick. So
Definitely. All right, let's go to Quan Martin, the second rounder, Jartavius, aka Quan Martin. He goes by Quan, so we will call him Quan. And then I want to kind of circle back and reset the corner depth chart going into the spring, because I think both these guys are going to be starters on it. What do you make of Quan Martin? Both of going back to back corner. Obviously, Martin's a nickel, but going back to back corner and the player himself.
Yeah, so I think Quan is more of a, you mentioned nickel. I think that's 100% right. He is a nickel, but he's also a post safety, plays box safety. He's a guy that literally, I think, fits this defense's vision of what a safety can and should do at an extremely high level. Like, he literally can play, the two safety spots. He can play the nickel. I don't think you want him living as the Buffalo nickel, but he did do that a little bit at Illinois, right? And then he even had a couple games, I think it was Michigan, where he plays outside as an outside corner. So you just got a guy who's very instinctive, very tough, and just an excellent football player. So I think having a piece like that is really important, right? Because it allows you to kind of say, hey, much in the same way that there's position flex along the offensive line, it's like, how do we get the best four guys out on the field? And I think, right now it's like, hey, Cam Curl can play the box safety. He can play the post, or he can play the post and Cam can play the, he can play the box and Cam can play the post. And it's just, I really like the pick because he's good at all the things. So, again, much like Manuel Forbes, he was a very productive college player with excellent tape, quality human being, right? Which you can tell was very important to them, because literally every one of these guys, I don't know KJ Henry, and Christian Rodriguez has some issues, but all of them.
Henry was like a team captain. Dabo raves about him.
So we talk about how that was really important to them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And, Andre Jones, the last guy, was a team captain as well. So it's like, that was a big thing. He is that type of guy. So great guy, great film, position flex, tough football player, and he's very quick and instinctive. And I like him a lot, and again, people say, is it a need? I looked at that time when he was picked, he was the best person I had on my board. The offensive lineman had kind of gone through a little bit of a run. The edges had kind of gone through a little bit of a run, and he was far and away the best player. So I know they liked him, and it just seems to make a lot of sense to me that he's the pick at whatever it was, 47.
Yeah. I'm going to update the graphic here, Logan, for those watching on YouTube. We're going to go from cornerback Quan Martin to DB Quan.
There we go. I like
because
that.
Because he is a guy that, while kind of, I think, is going to be slotted in to start at the nickel. You mentioned that position flex, and people are starting to get kind of angry about the position flex thing on the offensive line, and I get it. Like, with the offensive line, you can only play one position at once, and you need a left tackle, you need a left guard, you need a center, you need a right guard, you need a right tackle on every single play. You don't interchange. That's not true in defensive back situations.
Correct.
And especially in the modern NFL with so much motion. If you can have him on one side, lined up over a nickel, and then there's a quick motion and Cam Curl, and he can exchange responsibilities and he can drop back into the post, that's really advantageous, as opposed to feeling like you need to shift your entire formation because he can't handle certain responsibilities and Cam can't handle certain ones. You can just have the guys do this quick rotation, and everyone knows and understands exactly how that works, and it simplifies your defense. You don't need to have one guy per position on that back end, especially in your safeties and your nickels when you're in that Buffalo. Or frankly, if he also, if he's kind of got that safety build, you eliminate some of the need for the Buffalo. All the Buffalo is just having a safety play your nickel spot. And so if you can have a nickel who's technically a corner who also is fitting your safety spot, you just keep him on the field most of the time.
Right.
And I think that's really valuable. So with that said, you have Quan Martin, I think, is probably going to enter camp. I guess technically they're probably not going to give it to him. I'd imagine, I wouldn't be surprised if the first snap in August goes to Danny Johnson out of respect for Danny, because he's a vet, unless Martin is just clearly the better player all spring long. But certainly when they go to OTAs here next week or 2 weeks, whatever it is, Martin's Danny probably gets the first snap, and as Martin learns the defense, he's got a great chance to go in. But let's say by the time we're in the middle of training camp and starters really start to clear themselves, what do you think the depth chart looks like inside and outside at corner for this team?
Yeah, so if I was just putting money on it, just based off film, and obviously there's a little bit of projection, but I think Forbes starts outside. I think Benjamin St. Juste starts outside, and then I think I really believe that you're probably looking at Cam Curl and Quan as starting at safeties, and then maybe Percy Butler as like your Buffalo nickel,
Where does
or
Forrest fit in?
I think Forrest, I think maybe moves into like a true. So they I was talking to the safety coach a couple days ago, and they do have a different categorization for the Buffalo nickel, and I think Forrest fits that better than anyone else on the roster. Now he didn't feel comfortable doing it last year. He was much better off the ball, like in that quarters look. But if he can grow and kind of address that physicality into that Buffalo nickel role, I do think he becomes that guy for you. And I think that would be great. And I think Percy has some nickel skills. But then again, like because of the flexibility, you can say, I think Percy's outstanding in the post. He's awesome in the post. So let him play the post, and then Quan can play the nickel when they're all in the field together. So I think that's what's nice about this is that you elevate the back end by saying Forrest is best at this, Percy's best at this, and Cam's best at this, and we can take reps off Cam. I think that was a big part of this pick as well, is because Cam's been hurt the past 2 years, and the defense tanks when he's not in there. So can we take some of those kind of box plays off of his plate? And I think you have two guys in Percy and Forrest who can do that. And I think Quan can do that. It's just about finding, and again, that's why the pick is so perfect for the back end of this defense. Allows you to keep Cam healthy and allows you to get speak to those other young guys' skill sets at a really, really high level, because I think they're really high on those guys as well. And so now it's like, now we can just bring the best people to the party, put them in the best positions to be successful. So I do think it'll be kind of an amalgamation there of skill sets, but I think you're going to get the best from all four of those guys, and they're going to play a lot. So obviously the odd man out here is kind of Kendall Fuller, and I think he might get the first crack at nickel, but I think when all the dust settles, it'll look like a version of those four safeties filling out those back end spots.
Yeah, I agree. I'm still not convinced that Kendall's on the roster by the time opening day comes around.
I'm not saying he is, but I'm just saying I always
they'll give him a shot, and
right.
He deserves that. And
yes.
Kendall Fuller, I think we need to separate two things, right? We need to separate the contract and the football player. Kendall Fuller did a good job last year. He had a good season, like full stop. He had some plays made on him. He wasn't great. He shouldn't have gotten Pro Bowl nods. He should have been all pro consideration. But like Kendall Fuller was a good football player last year. He made a lot of plays. He helped win them some games. Certainly got plays made on him. Some of them were just incredible plays by the receivers where he's in good position. But he also can save you $8 million if you cut him in a summer where you're trying to extend Cam Curl, and you might be trying to do something with Montez Sweat potentially. Like there's a lot of moving pieces here. And now, as we'll get to, like Chase Roulier also could save you a lot of money. And I think he's probably very likely to have something happen with his contract, whether it's a restructure or whether it's just a flat out cut, like we'll see. But Fuller, that if you cut him, like you save $8.5 million. And at this point, I think that makes a lot of mathematical sense. I'm not saying they have to. I'm not saying it's irresponsible if they don't. I would love if Kendall stayed around because he's a vet who knows how to play. He knows how to study. He'd be a great influence on that room. And as we've talked about extensively on this podcast, there are not enough veterans in the NFL. There are not enough guys who are in rooms to be kind of quasi-coach leader types. Mentor, and Kendall Fuller, absolutely. But Kendall's also not, I don't even know if he's 30 yet, so it's not like he's ancient. He would be a great influence on that room. But I do wonder if he winds up not just being odd man out of the rotation, but potentially odd man out in terms of the roster as well, as you try to put that together and think about special teams and all that kind of stuff. But he'll absolutely be around for the spring. Or at least to start it, and then you go from there. At least I would think. I think
you said that really nicely because, like, he did a fine. It wasn't great. It wasn't bad. It was kind of right in the middle. And there's a lot of people who live right in the middle in the NFL. And I like Kendall. He's a good dude. I played with him as a rookie, and he says hi to me around the building. Awesome guy. But this is one of the kind of the dark sides of the NFL, right? And usually when you're bringing in this type of draft capital and this kind of quality player, and these guys, both of these guys have high upsides, Quan and Emmanuel, like you're kind of like, well, someone's got to go. And that's tough and that's sad, but ultimately that's the sad truth of this business. So we'll see what happens, but I definitely think that is a possibility. And it's a more acute a possibility now than it was obviously before the draft. So
Right. And by the way, these kinds of things can also work in your favor. There's a guy starting at left tackle right now that the Commanders got a couple years ago because the Bears did the same exact thing. And so, as we move to the offensive line here in a second,
People are mad that they didn't draft certain positions there. They're not done signing guys. Just as they'll let guys go, they'll ultimately probably bring a couple of more guys in.
who's there.
You are looking live.
This just in.
Not my beat.
All right, and for that, and appreciate him sticking with us through the phone issues, it is our pleasure to welcome in from ESPN, Matt Miller, who crushed it this weekend on day 3 of the draft, and of course, crushed it like he did every year leading up to that. It's just, Matt, you got to be on TV this weekend. It was such a cool moment for you, talking about what it was like to grow up, kind of idolizing Kuiper and what it meant to you to be on that set this weekend. And then it also is in your backyard, right? So at what point do you kind of get off set on Saturday and just go, wow, I can't believe I did that?
It hasn't hit yet. I think the post-draft exhaustion is setting in. The adrenaline wore off. I woke up Sunday morning, I felt like I'd been hit by a car. So I think the adrenaline wore off, man. But honestly, it was such a special moment for so many reasons. And I can't say enough about how the people at ESPN helped make that a really special moment for me. My wife and kids were able to go to the draft, and I haven't told anyone else this story, but we're going to get into it. It's 5 minutes before the draft starts. I hear you know how it is. You got monitors in your ears. You can't hear anything. But I got this weird, I should probably turn around. And I turn around and look to my left, and my parents are standing there. And I didn't know they were going to be there. And they're smiling and waving at me. And I'm starting to get emotional. And I'm like, okay, I got to turn around. And I got to focus on my job. Otherwise I'm going to start bawling on live TV. So it was top to bottom, an amazing day. It was such a fun time. Getting to work with Mel and Todd and Reese Davis and Louis Riddick was awesome. But it's you're always thinking about the next year. So I started my 2024 doc today on the old spreadsheet, and I'm ready to get rolling, man.
That is awesome. I appreciate you sharing that story a lot. And then you had to go on TV and as your parents are making you well up and talk about 150 dudes that most of us have never heard of.
Right?
And now we all have opinions on, but you've had opinions on them for a while because, like you just said, you've been working on them for a year. So I'll just ask as broadly as I can, what did you make of what the Commanders did over the 3 days as we sit here in Washington with bated breath for your analysis?
Yeah, I really liked what they did. Now, we can all sit back and say, man, they didn't draft a single quarterback. That makes me a little nervous. But it's also the idea of what are the expectations for this team in 2023 with new ownership coming in. A lot of things are fluid right now for the Washington Commanders. So if your expectation is we're going to go out and we're going to beat the Cowboys and we're going to beat the Eagles and we're going to beat the Giants and we're going to win the East, you might look at this draft and say, okay, well, still don't feel great about quarterback or left tackle unless you're a believer in Sam Howell, in which case you're going to be shaking your head at everything I say. But if you look at this draft as, hey, let's get ourselves set up for what's the future, for what's coming, new ownership, likely a new stadium, and a situation in 2024 where there will be some legit quarterback prospects at the very top of the draft, one of them being somewhat of a local in Caleb Williams. So I think you look at it that way of, hey, let's see what happens with Sam Howell, and let's see what happens with Jacoby Brissett, who's a really good veteran quarterback. And if it doesn't work, well, the new ownership can build this franchise around a quarterback who is literally from Washington, D.C., and Caleb Williams. So I think it's win-win. I love Emmanuel Forbes. I really like spinning the middle rounds, bolstering the trenches. I'm a gigantic KJ Henry fan. I think he's going to be a steal for this team. And even Chris Rodriguez, had it not been for, the DUI, the suspension, might have been drafted several rounds earlier. So overall, not the sexiest draft in terms of positions, but I think a really smart one for building a team.
Matt Miller, ESPN, is with us. So it's funny because I think we disagree a little bit on how, but totally agree on the philosophy. This draft was always, or this season was always going to come down to whether or not Sam Howell was good or not. And drafting a quarterback now actually can hurt you. And I think we've seen this over the years, Matt. And frankly, when I used to be on the beat, the last year that I was on the beat here before I switched into the studio role was 2019 when they drafted Haskins. And Jay Gruden was perplexed because he's like, you just spent my first round pick in a season where I have to win on someone who's not going to help me. And so if you're Rivera, you're like, okay, at least we got Emmanuel Forbes. And if Howell sinks, then I'm going to sink. But that's the boat that they're rowing in. Just real quick to kind of close that loop, what did you have as Howell last year? Because I know some people that had him as QB1 last year in that class that was obviously very down. Sounds like you did not quite have that grade on Sam Howell last year.
No, let me pull my board up real quick. I didn't have that grade on him. I had him as a mid-round. I think it was round 4. I'll get it pulled up. But I wasn't the biggest Sam Howell fan. I'll admit that. I didn't see it in what he did that final year at UNC. Yeah, so I had a 4th-round grade on him. So I didn't see like that from him, you know. To me, he's someone I want to be proven wrong, because everything I've heard about Sam Howell is he's a really good dude. So I would like to be proven wrong on this evaluation. I saw him as someone who was going to be as good as the weapons around him. And I think that's what happened at UNC. When he had the dudes around him, you know, Diamond Brown, Daz Newsome, the 2 great running backs, he was able to distribute and just be a guy. When he had to kind of put the team on his back in 22, that's when he struggled, especially early in the year. So, again, best case scenario, I'm very wrong about Sam Howell, and you guys have your quarterback of the future, and you're paying him the price of a 5th-round draft pick for 2 more years. That's a great problem to have if I'm incorrect about Sam Howell. Best case, you know, and then the other side of it is, hey, if Howell is like, okay, he's kind of who we thought he was, you know, he's going to be a solid backup. Well, then we're looking at a draft next year that has Caleb Williams, that has Drake May, that has Michael Penix, that has Quinn Ewers. Like there are some dudes that look like they could be legitimate franchise quarterbacks in next year's draft.
No doubt about it. All right, so let's get beyond Forbes, who you said you like, but we obviously talked about him or had the chance to talk about him a little bit more on Friday, the nature of a Thursday draft and a Monday through Friday show. Quan Martin is so interesting because I think a lot of folks wanted the Commanders, a lot of fans wanted them to go offensive line there. You have a guy in Cody Mock on the board who everybody loves, in part because he's missing his 2 front teeth, but also because he's a nasty good football player. But what did you make of the Martin pick, both of like who you think he is as a player and the value they get there for what else was on the board at 47?
Yeah, at 47, that was a little bit of a reach for me, but I say that based on, like, you know, when we put a ranking on a player, it's for a generic team. You know, so it's like no team needs to take into equation, no scheme fits taken into equation, and the run on the position groups is not taken into the equation. So I like Quan Martin. He was one of the guys. I was the first of the, like, ESPN analysts this year to file their rankings. You know, it's like, you can't all do it the day of the draft, right? You got to like spread the stuff out. So I was like, hey, I'll turn mine in early. No big deal. And he was the one player I texted my editor, was like, I'm going to regret not moving him up. I should have bumped him up higher. So the versatility that he brings to the table is amazing. He's just super. I mean, he's all over the field. You know, he's everywhere. He can play nickel. He can play single high. He's got great speed. And I actually thought that safety was the biggest need on defense. When we did our team needs, I got Washington, and I was like, gosh, this safety spot is not good. And so whether you see him as a nickel back or as a true free safety, or even, you know, kind of a hybrid safety that can play either up or down, like, it was such a huge need for this team. And so I know you mentioned left tackle, and it was one of my spots where I was like, gosh, this team has to you got to get a tackle, They were all gone. Like, the tackles went so early. Even Anton Harrison went in the 1st round. And I felt like when that happened, when Harrison went pick 28, after that happened, I was like, oh man, we're going to see a run on linemen if he's going this early. And we did. You know, like Matt Bergeron goes at 38, Steve Avila goes. So it's like you just saw, you know, even the Jets at 43 needed a tackle badly and didn't grab one. So I do think it was a situation where I'm a Cody Mock fan as well. I think he's probably a guard in the NFL. So it's one of those things of like, do you want to draft a guard here, or do you want to get someone like who's going to start immediately at safety and can potentially be a very big impact player? And then you could look at interior offensive line a little bit later in the draft.
By the way, was the editor that you texted Ben Arledge?
It was. Absolutely was.
So story time on my end. Ben Arledge and I were roommates when we both were interns at ESPN back in 2011. I had not seen Ben since we left Connecticut back in the summer of 2011 until we were at High Velocity in Indy this year, and Nora Princiati, our good mutual friend from The Ringer, brought us together and was like, do you know Ben? Do you know Craig? And we're like, holy crap, what are you doing here? So that's my Ben Arledge story.
That is amazing. That is absolutely amazing. Great guy, one of the best.
Yeah, phenomenal. And way too stupid of a story to make up. Matt Miller's with us from ESPN for a few more minutes here on the Hoffman Show. So one of the guys, so I do a podcast with Logan Paulson, who played 10 years in the league and is a gigantic film nerd and loves O-line play. His biggest question mark in this class for the Commanders was Braden Daniels. He thinks he might like he sees some of the traits that he likes in the tackle, but he's not completely sold that he's going to be a tackle in the NFL. And that was obviously the Commanders' attempt to address tackle, which we've both mentioned already in this conversation. What do you make of Daniels as a prospect and how he projects if he's going to play outside?
Yeah, he's super quick. The great thing is he's played 18 games at left guard, 14 at left tackle, 11 at right tackle. So you could try him at left tackle, and if it doesn't work, all right, no problem. We're going to kick him inside because he has experience there. So I think it's a safe pick in that regard. He's definitely quick. The short arms, normally I'm a big like, ooh, short arms. He's the same size as Charles Leno. So it's like this can work, that size. And for offensive linemen with me, if you've got short arms, you better have great feet. And I do think he has good enough footwork to make up for that on the outside. So I'm intrigued by it. When I graded Daniels again for that, like, you know, hypothetical team, I thought, man, he'd be a really good guard because of his movement ability, because he's a little bit lighter. Like, let's just let him work in space, you know, like a 49ers type run blocking scheme. He's going to be great there. But at left tackle, like, it's worth seeing what he can do. And again, because he's played 3 different spots, it's not a projection. You know, a lot of times teams draft a guy and people are like, well, if it doesn't work, we'll just move him. And you're saying, let's move him to a position he's never played before. But with Daniels, he's done all that. He's proven he can play on either side of the line. He can play inside or outside. So it's like in the 4th round, worst case scenario, you've got a 3rd guard, which is a pretty dang good spot for the 4th round.
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, they also go Ricky Stromberg out of Arkansas on the offensive line as well. I think he's got a chance to be their starting center and a really good one. Do you think he will be ready to be a starting center in the NFL as a rookie?
Yeah, absolutely. He was one of my favorite players in the draft. Like, if we make our list of, like, guys that, like, you love the way they play, he was mine. Like, I am such a huge fan of his. He's tough, physical. He can move really, really well. Now, like you mentioned, you know, last year he only played in 2 games, so that's going to be the thing of like, last year he played in every game. Sorry, getting ahead of myself. So replacing someone in Chase Roulier, who only played in 2 games last year, seems like it's going to be an easier transition, you know. So I do think I would pencil Stromberg in starting day one. I think that's his upside is as a starter, but the strength, the toughness, and that mobility at the second level, like, it's all there for him to step right in.
Yeah. It's also such an interesting thing for me when you get a new coordinator in, because it's like everyone's starting over. Now, granted, guys who have been in NFL systems and have NFL experience and understand the NFL rhythm and schedule and all that kind of stuff, it's always going to be easier. But it's not like, Tyler Larson, who was there last year, was their backup, is going to have some massive advantage over Stromberg because he's never been in the system before either. So obviously learning capacity is going to be a big deal.
And I would say, like, Eric Bieniemy had a rookie center and Creed Humphrey in Kansas City, and a lot of people are like, you can't do that. You can't have like a left-handed rookie center. You know, that's never going to work. And he was amazing. Like, he probably should have been an all-pro as a rookie. So EB has some experience with getting a rookie center up to speed and getting them out there.
I've never thought about that before. Is left-handed centers, is that like Belichick's thing with left-handed punters? Does that matter?
Yeah, it does. Apparently it doesn't, because Creed's really good and Mahomes doesn't complain about it. I think it probably mattered more like back in the day of like everybody being under center all the time. But Creed Humphrey's the only left-handed center in the NFL that I know of, and it does, like, there's a different spin on the ball. So it's one of those things I guess everybody has to get used to.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. The shotgun thing versus how the ball would come out versus under center. I've literally never spent 1 second of my whole stupid life thinking about that. And now I cannot stop thinking about it. All right, last thing, Matt, for you on the way out, because you said you loved him. Why do you love KJ Henry so much, their 5th-round pick out of Clemson?
Man, every time I watch Clemson play, you know, you're trying to watch Miles Murphy and Brian Brzee because, like, oh, they're first-round picks. And there was a time early in the year where I was like, wait, what number is Miles Murphy? Because this other guy might be better. And so you're like flipping through your notes, like, wait. Like, I love KJ Henry. I mean, he flashes every time you watch him play. I mean, he's quick in space. He's like nonstop motor. He's running down backs. He's like running down screen plays. He's just an all effort defensive end. I love that. But he's athletic as well. And I think I said this when he was drafted on the telecast. Montez Sweat and Chase Young, like, there's decisions that have to be made with those contracts, especially Chase Young not getting the 5th-year option. KJ Henry's going to have an opportunity to prove this year that he can be that guy. And I know Chase Young came in with like expectations through the roof, but injury has limited that. If they're not going to bring him back, KJ Henry's got a shot to prove that he can be that guy.
Yeah, and frankly, even if he doesn't hit starter caliber immediately, like James Smith-Williams and Casey Tuhill are also going to be free agents after the season, and F.A. Obata re-signed on a one-year deal. He is the only, I guess Andre, what's his name, Jones, the guy they took in the last round as well. Yeah. Like, those are the only two edge guys under contract in 2024 currently. So I hope you're right, and so do they, I guess is the short version of that.
And then he's talented. I can't wait for you to get to watch him in rookie camp or training camp. He's a lot of fun.
No doubt about it. Matt, great work this weekend. I've been a fan of your work for a long time. Glad to finally have you on the show, and hopefully we get a chance to do it again here in the relatively near future.
Sounds great, man. Appreciate it.
All right, Matt Miller, everybody from ESPN. Huge ups to him. Crazy weekend, as you heard, taking the time on a Monday as he gets back to work to spend some time with us here on the Hoffman Show. It is kind of a crazy, quirky thing that the Commanders have with this class is, Henry, whether he's a starter or a backup, like he's a part of the plan for the future. Their seventh rounder, Andre Jones, do I have that right, Anthony? Andre Jones, do I have the name right?
The last
pick of the draft? That's his name, right?
Yeah.
It's Andre something, and I think it's Jones. I should probably look that up instead of just continually potentially saying the wrong name. Andre, edge, Commanders.
Yep, Andre Jones.
Draft,
number
pick.
233.
Excellent. See, why'd I doubt myself?
I don't know. Sometimes that's what, humans do. We second guess ourselves. Sometimes it's for the good. Sometimes it's for the worse.
Should have confidence. Yes. Just blindly say stuff, whether it's right or not. Works for people in radio and television all the time.
Yes, sir.
Anyway, these guys probably are a part of the team no matter what. I mean, the thing is, both these guys are also really good athletes. So special teams obviously plays a factor there as well. But it's going to be really interesting. Like the next month, this team's going to make moves. Some signings, some cuts. And how that all plays out is going to be pretty fascinating. Then the question becomes, do you also get extensions in there as well? Curl, I think, is the most likely. I don't think Sweat gets done because I think in part they want to save that decision for after the season and see what happens with Chase. Is he the guy they want to keep? They don't want to commit too early to Montez. And frankly, Montez has played really well, and they like him a lot. I don't know that he's played well enough to garner a $24 million a year contract. So if he's willing to sign for 19, sweet. But that ain't market value. That would be a silly thing for Montez to do. All right. When we get back, we talk about all this. We'll go through pick by pick with Michael Phillips and talk about the decisions left to be made. Michael Phillips, Richmond Times-Dispatch, joins us next on The Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and always live on the free Odyssey app. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always alive as well on the free Odyssey app. Back to the phones we go and welcome in our good buddy Michael Phillips from the Richmond Times-Dispatch. Miguel, ¿cómo estás? ¿Ça va bien? Now I just went trilingual on you.
I didn't catch the second one. Yeah, I'm not a three-tool player, so I think my draft stock just fell. So it's a good thing. Good thing we've already got the draft out of the way, man. My stock's tumbling.
Yeah, I started in English, and then I hit you with a ¿Cómo estás in Spanish, and then I went, and I'm trying to use more French because I'm studying French for when I eventually go to the Olympics next year. So I hit you with the French. Ça va bien?
I could never take French because, you got your names. I always took Spanish. I was Miguel, of course.
Yes.
But my name is in French class.
No, what's your name in French class?
Michel.
Oh.
And so for very obvious middle school reasons, that was not a class that was accessible to me.
No, I think you just should have been Je suis Michael. And if they try to do Michelle, you'd be like, no. Je m'appelle Michael.
Olympics sounds fun. Who are we going to have? We're going to have 3-on-3 basketball, right?
Yeah, you'll have that. You'll have all the other stuff that we'll actually go see. I wouldn't mind taking in the 5-on-5. I know we'll have some soccer. I know we're trying to do a track day. So we'll see what else we can come up with. And then we'll escape Paris and go down to the south of France. And that's going to be my summer vacation in 2024. And I'm pumped
now
about
we're
it.
talking.
We are saving up between now and summer of 2024 to afford that, but that is our plan for the summer of 2024. All right, enough about my vacation plans a year from now. Large, gigantic picture. What do you make of the Commanders draft? I don't know if you want to go with a letter grade, a percentage, like a dislike, pass, fail, but as you walk away from the weekend, have a day to digest it, what do you make of what they did over the 3 rounds?
Yeah, I don't object to any single pick in a way that I'm going to get loud on the radio about. Like any one pick, we can talk about it and when it was made. And I guess Quan's the one who was probably most, off projection or whatever. But I don't have a problem with it conceptually if that's the guy you like and that's the skill set you want. To me, the story coming into the draft was, what are they going to do about the offensive line? And I'm not satisfied with what we've got coming out of here. Now, there's a long time between now and when they play football, Craig, but if this is the offensive line they go into the season with, I just don't see how that's fair to Sam Howell in an important year for him and Eric Bieniemy in an even more important year for him.
So I don't think that they're screwed on the offensive line if Chris Paul or Sadiq Charles can play left guard at a passable level, because I think that the scheme upgrade with Bieniemy and a play caller who actually knows how to insulate a quarterback, and by the way, a quarterback who knows how to insulate himself better than Carson Wentz, which is the lowest possible standard in the NFL, all due respect to Carson, is going to help solve those problems. Why are you still level 5 alarm concerned?
Well, I think we see eye to eye on this. You say if Sadiq Charles or Chris Paul can play offensive line at a passable level, and I say it'll be all right if Chris Paul or Sadiq Charles can play offensive line at a passable level. I've missed the part where Sadiq Charles has shown anything to lead me to believe he'll be there. Again, you're betting big on Eric Bieniemy and his development in his scheme. I certainly understand that, and he has earned the benefit of the doubt through his performance in Kansas City. But boy, if you aren't kneecapping him right out of the gate, I'd also maybe draw your attention to left tackle, where Charles Leno Jr. is a wonderful dude, Walter Payton Man of the Year nominee. He does great stuff in the community. But dang, if he didn't fade hard down the stretch in really important football games, or by the way, if they just beat the Cleveland Browns or the New York Giants, they're in the playoffs. We're probably not talking about any of this. We're singing a happier tune. I don't know that I can trust him for 17 games of football. I don't think you can trust Sam Cosmi for 17 games of football. There's a lot of depth and a lot of positional flex, a lot of guys who can do all 5 positions. We heard that about Braden Daniels. Yeah, you can play him at all 5 positions. I just don't know if they have enough guys who are good at one position.
That is fair, and that is something that – and I do think that's a fair critique of Leno, because I feel like a lot of people just think he stinks, and I'm like, that's absolutely not true. He was fine for most of last year, but I think saying he faded a bit down the stretch is a bit fair. Also, that did coincide with the continuing mounting injuries at center. And I do think that affected the line play as a whole in terms of not just having inferior players that are having to cover for each other, but the line calls, like they got themselves in some really bad spots, like the Giants game. Like Leno was set up to look really bad against Kayvon Thibodeau multiple times, and boy did he. So that's nice. But I guess the question I would then have, Michael, is would you have done anything particularly different, or is this hey, we went into the draft hoping that we could get some O-linemen, but the board fell in a way that we were kind of screwed on that regard, and now we're going to have to make up for it in this final wave of free agency?
Yeah, the board fell in a terrible way in that regard. Forbes was the pick in the first round there because you didn't get, the guys you wanted didn't fall to you, and I certainly understand that. Obviously, you can only draft the way the board's set up. Going back there in the second round, you don't address that tackle position. Then the fourth round, you make so my favorite pick was third round. Yeah, I don't know that I've said nice things since I got on here, Craig. So let me say something nice real quick. Love the Ricky Stromberg pick. I think he's an excellent addition at center. They needed a center. I think that was a high quality pick. But then you come back in the fourth round, and this is my least favorite selection. I think you make a panic trade to go up and get a tackle before the board clears out, and you pick a guy who some scouts say is a guard. And boy, if we haven't walked down that road before.
Yeah, Logan in particular is not super high on him, and I know we just had Matt Miller on who says kind of the same thing, thinks he's probably more of a guard, but the traits are there. And then I guess the other question too with all of this, Michael, is like, can they afford to even keep what they have around? Like when we start talking about the cuts and things like that along the offensive line, Chase Roullier's name comes up for obvious reasons. He seems the easiest one to be like, yep, he's going. If it's not him, it's Andrew Norwell. Maybe Norwell's even easier. Norwell, Roulier, Cornelius Lucas is a guy that I've seen floating around because of the price tag there for your swing tackle. But he's also he's the next guy up. So how do you think that room ultimately shakes out with those three guys being around or not by the time we get, let's say, to August in training camp?
Yeah, and I think the ownership will solve a lot of this, too, in the sense of, you don't want to right now convert Cornelius Lucas to a bonus-heavy contract with void years at the end. Like that's not a check that current ownership wants to cut, but maybe you got that move in your back pocket for when you need it later. I agree with you. Norwell's gone. I do think Roullier's gone just because, look, that was a good signing when it happened. That was one of Ron's very first signings, if not his very first signing, if I remember correctly. He was a homegrown player who took command at that position, called out the plays well, got the line in great spots. Investing in him was a smart decision. It just didn't work out. Every franchise has guys they sign and it doesn't work out for reasons that are totally out of anybody's control. I think that's what we're looking at here, which is part of why I like the Stromberg pick, to bring somebody in so you're not committed to trying to get Chase Roulier healthy in a way that's not good for anybody, let alone Chase Roulier. As we go down the list, I don't know that their hand is totally forced on making big moves. People keep talking about Kendall Fuller. I don't know that they need to make that move. I think while they are up against the cap, there's still enough flexibility to get them between here and there, and they really haven't broken the glass in terms of converting guys to bonuses and kicking the can down the road, which would be an entirely justifiable thing to do at this juncture.
Right. I think with Roulier, it's just a straight out cut. He's just gone, and that's $8 million. And if you just do that one alone, you get the space you need to sign your draft picks, which they don't have right now. And then you start, if you need it, whether it's for a curl extension, whether it's for whatever else you might want, you can always do some of the conversion stuff later, like you said, when the new owner gets to cut that check and the cash goes immediately, even if the cap is later. You got to where I wanted to go next. Michael Phillips, Richmond Times-Dispatch, with us here on the Team 980. As far as the DB room goes, you're talking not only about the cap situation, though, but from a playing time standpoint, now that we know, okay, Forbes is going to be on the outside, St. Jude's going to be on the outside, Martin's going to be in the nickel. Who are the odd men out here as they rotate in Derek Forrest, Percy Butler, Cam Curl, and all these different corners that they have drafted over the last couple of years, and Kendall Fuller sitting there at 28 coming off a pretty solid year?
I think you put Fuller inside on the slot. I know that's not a popular answer for anybody, and but he's played that position and played it well before. And in a make or break year, I like having the stability of Kendall Fuller way more than rolling the dice with Quan Martin. And again, I don't dislike Quan Martin. I don't dislike the pick. But if you're saying, would you rather have a guy who's been in a Super Bowl or a guy who was in the Illinois secondary last year and has not played in the NFL? I would like the guy who was in the Super Bowl who played at a high level last year. I want to find a way to get him out there. Now, Ron will tell you, I'm guessing when we talk to him about this later, hey, look, there's so many sub-packages, there's so many different ways we can go. It really doesn't matter. And he's right to an extent. But I agree that on paper we've probably got a little too many guys and not quite enough snaps to go around. I don't know that that's the worst thing in the world. I do think Cam Curl gets a new contract this offseason. He cements in. I also think Quan Martin could potentially slide to safety and bolster your depth there. I don't think that's a terrible way to use him either. So I think there's enough options to keep everybody happy, at least at first glance.
No, I do too. And obviously, as the season goes, then you're going to have injuries. You know, St. Jude's has obviously battled a lot of those over the years. You know, they want to try to keep Curl healthy as he's so important, and Martin can take snaps from him in both, especially in the box, but also over top to try to keep him a little bit fresher. So there's a lot of good options there. Defensive line, they take two guys on the edge. What does this mean for Chase Young's future, Montez Sweat's future, and the timelines of those things being decided, if anything?
Yeah, well, I don't think Montez Sweat is going to get a contract this offseason. I'm not ruling it out under new ownership, but it feels far more likely you let the two play for the contract, so to speak, this year. I think the general consensus would be there's only one contract available. Now, if they both ball out, you do find a way to get them both back in the building, obviously. In that scenario, Ron Rivera is probably coaching. So that's a win for everybody, so to speak. If Ron Rivera is coaching next year, good things happen this year, and we were talking about good things. So, you know, if you need to get them both back in the building, you can. But you're assuming that only one of the two will be back. You don't know if you want to bring F.A. Opata back. You know, you've got kind of a collection of guys downstream. Your James Smith-Williams, players like that. I think it's very important to replenish that depth right now. And everybody raves about K.J. Henry, man. That's the guy who I got the most unsolicited messages about, like, boy, you know, you're going to like covering this kid. This kid's really great. So to bring a little bit of that into the room, I think was a good touch in the early rounds.
Yeah, Michael Phillips with us here, Richmond Times-Dispatch on the Team 980. All right, last thing for you. What happens first, a more definitive announcement on the ownership situation or the schedule release on May 11th?
Ooh, that's a great timetable. I love it. That's about where I would set the over-under, too. The schedule release is also the next football day that gives everybody cover to put out their news that they don't necessarily want to have an entire news cycle. Give me schedule release first. I refuse to be burned by Dan Snyder and his lawyers. I continue to say the same thing. And I think you believe this too. This is going to happen. It's going to happen. The full transfer will happen before they play a down of football this year. There's nothing to worry about. It is the Harris Group. They will buy the team. But dang if it's not going to be a really tedious process between here and there, even after the official announcement, waiting for the league meeting, all those things. So I'm going to take schedule release in that game. Okay.
I think I'd probably agree with you. I just feel like they won't really announce anything till right before the meetings. Then they'll be like, yeah, we're going to vote on it. And it's like, okay, that's what we thought all along. That's good. Goodbye, Dan. See you later. But I also wonder if, like, this gap in between, if the NFL is like, all right, hey, I think we're done. I think we're done with all our checks. You guys can announce this now, because they love to dominate a news cycle.
You know, I wonder, though, if part of this hasn't been watering down the, like, what was it, when World War II ended and everybody, came back off the boats and celebrated and went nuts in Times Square. Like, I think maybe there's an intentional effort to not have, a day of celebration and more of just kind of a long, muted process, because as much as this guy has been an absolute thorn in their sides, that's kind of the way the NFL prides itself on conducting its business. They cover for the owners. They don't throw owners under the bus. It would surprise me if they made an event out of this beyond, we welcome the Harris Group. Thank you, Dan Snyder, for your service.
Yeah, no, I agree on the NFL side of it, but it's going to happen on some level organically. I think the celebration is going to come when there's a vote, because that's the one moment we know is going to happen and we know we can plan for, so to speak. because it'll be hey, it's going to happen. I mean, although I could see the NFL also being yeah, we'll get to it at some point in these 3 days. They don't really release necessarily the agendas for these types of things beforehand. But at the same time, it's hey guys, he's dead. You can throw a funeral.
I am curious if there's some kind of large fan base reaction on the day of the vote, parties, that sort of thing. It does seem like there's a pent-up demand for that, for sure.
Yeah, I would guess there's a pair of radio stations based in the District of Columbia that are probably thinking about that in some form or fashion. I don't know that
anybody.
For sure.
Could be anybody.
I would imagine, and perhaps might even hope, they would say, Michael. I perhaps might even hope.
I don't think you're referring to Big 100.
I literally would never.
Just here to have some fun, Craig.
I know. And hey, we have an hour opener of you plugging the Odyssey app. So, you bought yourself one. It's fine. Michael Phillips, everybody. Richmond Times Dispatch. By the way, I'm going to be down in Richmond in a couple of weeks. I'll text you. Hopefully I can actually see you in person, because that's a cool thing. Because you, Michael, you were in our neighborhood last week. You didn't even let me know, you big jerk.
You didn't come by to support the local 11, baby. I was up there for Open Cup soccer. I definitely should have dropped by the station and said, hey, I'm just too fired up about Richmond Kickers soccer. You can't blame me.
Yeah, I know. The Open Cup, getting to play at the big Audi field, good times. By the way, one other thing before I actually let you go, since we're now in the complete shenanigans mode of the interview, which is both typically where we start and we end with Michael. But as you probably know by now, Michael, we are streaming live on YouTube every single day, which is very exciting, which means we have graphics and the whole thing. And when I went to go make the little lower third graphic for you, I was editing one, just because I have a template, and then you sub out the text, etc. And I was editing something that I had used last week for Emmanuel Forbes. For a moment, it was Michael Phillips joining the show, who is the career leader in pick sixes in FBS history.
I was in school at the University of Kansas when we set what I believe is an unbreakable record, tore the goalpost down 3 times in a single season. I don't think any school will ever do that again.
That's incredible. Also, I thought because it's Kansas football, you were about to say 3 times in a single game.
Look, the 3 wins was the achievement. I mean, why not get your money's worth as a fan?
Absolutely. All right. I'm out of shenanigans. Thank you.
Take care, Craig.
All right. See you, buddy. That's Michael Phillips on the Hoffman Show on the Team 980. All right. Anthony, we are in complete no man's land. What do you want to do here? Do you want to take a quick break, come back, reset the show, and come back at 6? Or should I start figuring out what we're going to talk about for the next 5 minutes?
I think we should take a quick break, to be honest.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back on the Hoffman Show. Pew, pew.
Here's what's trending on the Team 980.
I wasn't ready for this, but that's fine. Let's see.
I can help you out real quick.
All right, what's trending, Anthony? Tell us.
There is an NBA game tonight.
Okay.
Between the Denver Nuggets and the Phoenix Suns, set to tip off at 10.
Okay. That's good.
That's all I got.
Okay.
I bought you some time.
I appreciate that. There's a basketball game tomorrow night as well. The Lakers and the Warriors will play. And LeBron James spoke this afternoon, said he's locked in and will have to be completely locked in to beat Steph Curry. Excited about their rivalry renewing. Of course, Curry went off for, count them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 50 in Game 7 yesterday against the Kings. That is an NBA record. 4 points in a Game 7. Nevertheless, points on the road in a Game 7. Philly-Boston is also tonight, by the way. Joel Embiid not expected to play not only in Game 1, but Game 2. Braves and Mets playing a day-night, or playing this afternoon. Mets are up 1-0 in that one, top 5. That's what's trending. I'm Craig Hoffman on the Team 980. And by the way, he's Anthony Haney, also assisting on the Team 980. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Draft winners and losers at the top of the hour. Then we finally get into the thing that I've wanted to talk about all day, Stephen Curry's greatness. That is starting at 6:15. And at 6:30, we kind of round that out into a question. Is Steph Curry a top 10 all-time NBA player already? I was stunned as I started to make my list how easily the answer was definitively the answer. Yes or no, you have to listen at 6:30 to find out. Real quick, though, before we get to all that, let's hear from Martin Mayhew. One of the big criticisms of the Commanders draft was they didn't go up and get someone. A lot of the national pundits wanted that to be a quarterback, but you could say, oh, did you want to go up and get an offensive tackle? Did you want to go up and get a different defensive back, for instance, a Brian Branch out of Alabama when he started to fall into the second round? Well, here's Martin Mayhew talking about whether or not they could have been more aggressive or not trading up.
I mean, trades were a roller coaster. I mean, I'm really excited to be able to make that trade, but then we lost out on some. Were really disappointing. I wish I was more aggressive in a couple of situations, but it was an up and down thing with the trades. But we felt confident. You know, that was something that we had talked about earlier. Obviously, the GM in Buffalo has a relationship with our staff, and we have tuned into that pretty much really the round before that. We talked about that trade, so it worked out. It went pretty smooth, and we're really glad to have him.
It's really interesting to hear Mayhew say, like, I wish I would have been more aggressive in certain situations. I wonder what he means by that. And he's not one who gives a lot of interviews, if any interviews. So I doubt that we'll get to learn that. Perhaps that can be a question for Rivera at a press conference at some point, or someone will do some reporting and get the behind-the-scenes story on that. But that could mean including more future picks. It could have been making a call earlier. You know, you see a trade happen, and you're like, shoot, I didn't know that draft pick was up. We would have given up what's required to go get that, and maybe a little bit more. But ultimately, I think that is stuff for later. Like, I think the first two rounds where people are really critical of them, they got the guys they wanted. They got Emmanuel Forbes, who is who they wanted, and they got Quan Martin, who is who they wanted. And I have no problem with that. And especially the way the board fell. Look, if Paris Johnson's staring you at the face at 16 and you're just obsessed with Emmanuel Forbes and you pass on a guy who could be a left tackle of the future, fine. But that guy wasn't available. And any version of that guy wasn't available unless you thought like Anton Harrison was that guy and worth taking at 16. But like Broderick Jones was gone. Skoronski, gone. Darnell Wright, even at right tackle, is gone. Nevertheless, Paris Johnson. So you get that, and then you get the run, guys like Matthew Bergeron, who you really want in the second round, fall out or go out early. They got the guys they wanted, and they did a good job of getting the guys that they knew were going to be there and did their homework and felt really good about the scheme fits and all that kind of stuff. And, I thought Matt Miller, when he joined us earlier in the hour, said it great. Like, when he does his big board, he does it kind of scheme agnostic. Well, when you look at what Washington does, Quan Martin's a lot higher on that board than he is a scheme agnostic board because he fits multiple positions, and as opposed to that being a negative where it's like, I don't really know where I want to play that guy. It's like, oh, that's a huge positive because we can use him and his strengths in this role and that role. So, again, I'd be curious to know what Mayhew means there, but I think a lot of national folks and fans wanted them to trade up early in the draft, and I think he's probably referring to things later, and I have no problem with the early round staying put. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. And when we get back, Anthony and I will give our draft winners and losers for the weekend. Somehow we made it to the final hour of this here Hoffman show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. On YouTube, youtube.com/@theteam980. For those watching there right now, just in case you haven't, hit like. It's right there on your screen. And then hit subscribe. And then you can watch again very easily tomorrow. When we go live, it'll just pop right up on your phone, on your smart TV, whatever. Be like, hey, the Hoffman show's on. Do you want to watch? You had so much fun yesterday. You should do it again. Anthony, what is that voice that I've now done twice today?
I wish I could really, figure it out, to be honest, but I don't know.
No idea. We're just coming along.
Come on, man. Come on.
I didn't know you had the voice skills as well.
Oh, I can definitely,
You got what? Do you do impressions?
I don't necessarily do impressions. I'm not good. I don't think I'm good at them.
I got a couple in me.
I don't think I'm good at them.
I got a couple in me, and they just have to come up naturally. Can you do accents?
No. Again, I'm tone deaf. Like when it comes to
I didn't ask if you can sing. I know the answer to that is no.
I'm just saying, like when it comes to me and my voice inflections, on I don't know. I'm limited.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you had whatever this weird voice that I'm doing, you got that one too.
Yeah, man.
High five. Okay. NFL draft winners and losers. Please save us from ourselves. Let's get to it. Let's start with winners. Let's go 2 winners apiece, and then we'll see if we have time for the losers. I think we will. I'll start with the easy one. I'm going to go Eagles, but I wanted to steal this one, the easy one, because I think everyone needs to chill a little bit on the Eagles. They got a ton of talent, but because you've heard of all of these guys, because they all went to Georgia, because it all makes for a great story, because Keely Ringo was thought to be a top 10 overall pick after his freshman year and was still available in the 4th. It's like, oh, wow, they got him. What if he's not good? What if the inconsistency that made him drop is actually what it is? What if Jalen Carter, the work ethic stuff, is real and he's not that good? Like, you can't just say because they went to the Eagles and because Howie Roseman drafted them all and you've heard like their name ID is higher and they certainly have a lot of high-end talent and potential, whether it's Carter or Nolan Smith because of his freakish 40 time and everyone freaked out about. Like I like all these picks. And if I'm being honest with you, I genuinely think they will mostly work out. Like they will have a high hit rate. But part of that is, too, because they built an incredible infrastructure in Philadelphia with their coaching staff and the veterans that they have that will get the most out of players. And that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. The Fletcher Coxes, the Brandon Grahams teach the Jalen Carters, first they teach the Hassan Reddicks and the Josh Sweats, and then those guys can teach Jalen Carter and Nolan Smith, and then those guys will teach the next one and on down the line. And as long as you keep that DNA of greatness in your building, then yeah, it's going to work out and they can do things that other organizations can't. But to think that it's not worth playing the games because they're just so good and they have so much talent, like let's relax a little bit on that. So Eagles, definite winner. I think the Carter pick is fantastic. He's arguably the best player in the draft. He's got real special potential and he was going to have to go to the right situation, and I don't know that he could have gone to a better one. But let's not pretend like they just won the Super Bowl in April, because you don't win Super Bowls in April.
You're right. They did make a lot of noise.
A lot of noise. Super noisy.
I think another team that made some noise, and it's sort of kind of like my second favorite team, the Indianapolis Colts. Yes, they went out and got Anthony Richardson. You need a franchise quarterback in the league, but you also need to surround him with some talent. And I think they did that in going out and getting wide receiver from North Carolina, Josh Downs. They also acquired a running back, and they also got another tight end, and Will Mallory, who can do it all ultimately. But also they got some cornerback depth. They lost Stephon Gilmore. Kenny Moore's in his last year, and they went out and got Julius Brents and Darius Rush from South Carolina. So I think slowly but steadily, like the Colts are going to be revamping everything. They got a lot of young players, and they'll be able to, get some experience this year. But, like, in a year or two, I think they'll really be a team to be reckoned with.
Brents is so interesting. He's a guy that I would have loved to fall here. Or if the Commanders hadn't been able to trade back and kind of got stuck with Banks and Forbes off the board, then I would have been perfectly happy with them taking Brents. I really liked all the stuff that I read up on about him. My next winner is the Seahawks. Witherspoon, he's just, like, his film is nuts. He's so physical. And like the thing is, when you have two great corners, which they now theoretically do, if Witherspoon is what we think he is, and obviously Tariq Woolen was phenomenal last year, revelation last year. It does prove you don't need to spend a top 5 pick on a corner, but that is a position where a lot of top guys have panned out, obviously, including last year with Sauce Gardner. But you have two great ones. Like, it means that you get opportunities. And, like, Woolen had a bunch of picks last year. He's going to get more opportunities because people are going to not necessarily want to throw towards Witherspoon. Or maybe certain matchups, teams might like to throw at Witherspoon to stay away from Woolen, and that'll create opportunities for him. And when you got two guys that have a nose for the ball, play with the physicality they do, like, there's an attitude that Seahawks team is going to have defensively, and Witherspoon's going to be a part of it, where they hope, certainly, for the better part of a decade. And then they have their second first-round pick because of the Russell Wilson trade, and I guess the first one was from the Russell Wilson trade. The second one is their own natural pick, and they get the best receiver in the draft. They invest in Geno, while certainly they, need to figure out long-term at quarterback. They invest in Geno this offseason. They extend him. They pay him, respectable starter money. And they're surrounding him with guys that are going to make his job easier. Like, get the ball out quick, get the ball to Smith and Jigba, let him go. Like, that in the slot with Lockett and Metcalf on the outside, like, that's a heck of a receiving core. I caught a lot of flack this weekend, Anthony, because I said that the Commanders might have the best receiving core in football, and all the Bengals fans got really upset. And I get it. Like, those two are neck and neck to me. I would just argue that if you switched the players, that Joe Burrow's numbers and their amount of wins would not look any different. I think Jamar Chase is better than Terry McLaurin, barely. I think that Dotson is probably going to be better than Higgins, ultimately, but Higgins is a stud. I mean, he's like a 1. But I think Dotson's going to become a 1 level. And I think Samuel's the better of the slot guys, and it doesn't look like that because his usage is crap under Scott Turner, and that will change dramatically this year with Bieniemy. But if you want to talk about another team that goes 3 deep now, if Smith and Jigba's any good, Seahawks are right there because Metcalf is a beast. I don't think he's as good as the other two guys. I think Terry's a better player, but he's not far off. And then Lockett, all he does is just get open deep and score touchdowns, which is a pretty cool skill set for a receiver to have.
Yeah, I'm excited for what the Seahawks offense can be with all of those weapons.
All right, your last winner.
My last winner, and I don't know if you're going to view them as a winner, but I had the Pittsburgh Steelers as one of the winners. Part of it is, they did get Broderick Jones in the first round. They also went and got Joey Porter Jr. With the first pick of the second round, and I think he really has high upside. Also, he'll be able to learn from Pat Pete, a veteran out there, but they're young defensively, and I think him being able to learn from Pat Pete is going to be huge in his growth. But also, they got Darnell Washington, and I told you this on Friday. I think they're going to lean on Najee Harris and their running attack. So you pair him up with Pat Freiermuth, and then you also got Broderick Jones who can get out and, move. I'm really expecting the Steelers to go out there and ground and pound.
Yeah, I've seen them on some winners lists. I don't hate it. Like, I don't think they had a bad draft, but, like, to me, they're more in the class of where the Commanders are, where it's like, yeah, if this guy who I think is going to be a good prospect pans out, then you're great. Like, if Emmanuel Forbes is what Emmanuel Forbes was in college, which is a turnover machine who doesn't give up a ton of yardage, then, like, yeah, the Commanders are going to look awesome out of this draft. If Broderick Jones looks as good as he did in the very limited sample size we saw at Georgia, then yeah. But, like, he was part of a Georgia offense that was insane. And he played like 19 games or 13 games or something. Like, he hasn't played a lot of football. So there's a reason to me why he fell behind. Like, at the beginning of the process, it was Skoronski, Johnson, Jones, all in a clump. And it was like, take your pick of which one. And by the end of the process, Darnell Wright had jumped him by most boards, even though he's a right tackle. And Skoronski and Johnson were in a different class. And there's a reason for that. So I get it, and Joey Porter Jr. falls a little bit. I wonder how many teams had the scheme fit concerns that the Commanders, for instance, had with him. But I definitely don't dislike their draft. I think they did a good job. I'm not the biggest Darnell Washington guy. Like, he's an enormous human who made that one sick catch at the combine. And you're like, well, shoot, if that's who you are. But that's not who he was consistently on the field. Like, there's a bunch of tight ends in this draft that I think might wind up being more productive players. But we'll see. Tomlin's great at getting guys in using their strengths, and that's kind of the magic of the NFL. All right, real quick, like 30 seconds apiece. Losers. I wrote down 2. Do you agree with one or both of these?
Yes.
Which one do you want to talk about?
We can definitely talk about the Cowgirls.
Okay. But tell you what, we beat up the Lions enough last week. The Cowboys needed offensive line help. They needed offensive help in general. And they, didn't do it. No. They spend their first-round pick on a D lineman, which is maybe the strength of their team. Like, I get it. Make your strength stronger. And, like, he's a guy inside when a lot of their strength is outside. I'm not saying it was a bad pick, but it's like, was that really the best use of your first-round pick? And then they just continue to kind of do the same stuff where it's just like, okay, that guy's fine, but, like, isn't there better that you could do? They didn't take an O-lineman until the 5th round. They didn't take a top-flight receiver. Like, I don't really get what they were doing. Although I will say the Deuce Vaughn pick, for emotional reasons, phenomenal. And I think he's a good player.
Yeah, I like the Deuce Vaughn pick. He also can be a home run hitter for them. So I think they got good value with him. But, again, like the Mozzie Smith pick, definitely a question mark. Luke Shoemaker, I mean,
I like that pick for them because they needed to replace what's his name? Schultz, yeah.
Yeah, but he's also
I was going to say
old,
Dallas
though.
Goedert, but he's in Philly. Yeah. I mean, he's a good tight end who moves well, like played big-time football. He's ready to play right now.
Yeah.
Like, I have no problem with Schoonmaker.
Okay. But yeah, again, they did need to address O-line, and they just didn't necessarily do that. I think skill-wise, they have everything that they necessarily need, but you got to address that offensive line, and they just didn't prioritize it this draft.
Nope, which is crazy for the Cowboys, who won with a great offensive line for the better part of the last decade when they won. All right, those are our winners and losers on the Hoffman Show. Again, we did pass-fail grades on Friday for every team's first-round pick. If you want that, go back, check the podcast, or watch it on YouTube, my page, the Team 980s page. It is in both places for your viewing pleasure. When we get back, speaking of viewing pleasure, Steph Curry, we're talking about what he did yesterday and why the Warriors ultimately should terrify the rest of the NBA. That's next on the Team 980. the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app, on YouTube as well, youtube.com/@theteam980. Whether you want to stream us to watch, whether you want to stream us to listen, we have options for you. All right, Steph Curry yesterday, the chef was cooking. It was an unbelievable performance, but I want to save some of the Steph discussion for the next segment because I would like to ask this simple question, which the answer was a lot simpler, I think, than I even thought watching yesterday and considering this question until I sat down to actually hash it out. Is Stephen Curry already a top 10 all-time NBA player? I was stunned at how easy the answer is. I'll tell you the answer coming up at 6:30. But I think on a larger scale, Anthony, before we get into Curry himself, it's important to point out that yesterday was as prime of an example as you will ever see of a champion versus a team that has not been there. And Steph carried the load for them offensively yesterday in a way that was truly absurd. He took 38 shots. He was fairly efficient in those 38 shots, even though he missed 2 free throws, something Steph Curry never does. Klay Thompson missed a bunch of free throws yesterday. Wiggins missed free throws. Wiggins also missed a ton of layups. Klay had a miserable shooting day. And yet, it was a 20-plus point win for the defending champions because they achieved the level that the Sacramento Kings didn't know existed. And it was fairly obvious to me as the game went on that as long as some offense caught eventually for the Warriors, that's where that was heading. And I was laughing at people who were like, man, the Kings are playing so well. The Kings are hanging in there. I was like, even some basketball people, like Van Gundy was saying on the broadcast, like, oh, Sabonis is playing great, like this. They got to feel good. If I'm Mike Brown, I tweeted out. I have the evidence. I have the receipts. I tweeted out at halftime. If I'm Mike Brown going into halftime up 2, I felt horrible. I would be pooping myself going into halftime if I'm Mike Brown up 2, considering how Klay Thompson had shot. It felt like the Kings were playing as well as they could possibly play. They're moving the ball well. They're getting out in transition. They're hitting shots. The crowd's into it. And you do all that. The Warriors are playing kind of like crap. And you're only up 2 at halftime? It's a wrap, bro. Because eventually Klay got going enough, and then Steph did what Steph does in third quarters. He lost his ever-loving mind, went on a run. They're up 10, and then they close it out in the fourth. And the Kings just didn't know that level of basketball existed. And there was a great story in The Athletic this morning by Shams Charania and Marcus Thompson about how Steph, who doesn't speak up very often, got out in front of the team the other day and was basically, like, after Game 6, he couldn't sleep. So he turns over in his bed at 3:45 in the morning and texts Draymond. Draymond also couldn't sleep, so he's up, and they start firing texts back and forth. And Steph, Draymond's like, I think I'm going to say something. And Steph goes, I got this one. And Draymond's like, you got it, champ. And Steph basically said, if you guys bring your A game, I will make sure we win. You just come try. You do what you do to the best of your abilities. No feelings, no nothing. If you get on the bus, I mean, this was literally what he said, according to multiple recounts of the story in The Athletic. If you get on the bus, you're committing to the team. If you're not ready to do that, stay home. Don't get on the bus. And apparently that was directed at guys like Jordan Poole, who might have been a little upset about minutes. Jonathan Kuminga, a little upset about minutes. And sure enough, everyone gets on the bus, makes that commitment, and damned if he didn't make it true. Klay Thompson, awful, awful shooting night. He was a menace defensively. He was awesome. So good. Draymond, fantastic. Kevon Looney, what can you say? 21 rebounds. Dominating Domas Sabonis. And to see that come together, to see the level of desperation, to see the level of the high level of force they played with, the Kings didn't know that you could do that. And that's the difference in a champion, a true champion. And I think sometimes this stuff gets overrated. Sometimes it's like, oh, the heart of a champion. No. Yesterday was heart of a champion stuff. Skill of a champion, and sometimes the skill is playing hard. Knowing exactly how much you have in the tank and leaving it all out there. And that's what the Warriors did yesterday to a level that the Kings could not reach. Now that they know, we'll find out who they are. But yesterday, Game 7-ish, they quite literally weren't ready.
I don't even know what to say. I think you just said everything I was, thinking about, Steph Curry's performance. It's just, I think these are the types of games like myself and like other fans, basketball fans in general, want to see out of Steph. I want to see Steph push to the brink. So him being in a Game 7, and yes, he's appeared in other Game 7s, but him with this unit right here where he has to be the guy for his unit and for him to go out there and dominate the entire game, going out, scoring 50, and ultimately leading his team to the second round, it just makes me appreciate Steph a little bit more because, again, we're witnessing greatness. And sometimes I think his greatness gets overlooked, and I'm glad that he's out here, making a name or continue to, make a name for himself because he already has a name.
I think there's a level that great players get to where they figure it out.
Yeah.
And like MJ obviously got to this level. LeBron, I feel like, has been at this level for a decade now, where when you're that great, like top 10 all-time great, and you figure it out, there are no more duds in big moments. You might lose, but like you will go down. I mean, LeBron in the 2017 finals, he didn't have a chance. There was no way he was winning that series. Steph was pretty much near the peak of his powers. KD was at the absolute peak of his powers. Clay was still great. Draymond was great. Iguodala was still great. Like, that is one of, if not the greatest teams to ever step on a basketball court. And LeBron damn near made it interesting by himself. And if he hadn't punched a whiteboard after game 1, like, who knows? But he goes out, drops 50, and obviously J.R. Smith has the ultimate brain fart, the whole deal. But like, they messed around and almost made that thing interesting. Like, and that was like classic LeBron. And by the time LeBron got back to Cleveland, like, LeBron had figured it out. Even the series he loses in Miami to San Antonio, the first year they lose to Dallas, you can criticize LeBron in a major way for that. He lost to J.J. Barea is kind of the meme-ified version of it, right? But when they lose to San Antonio, like, everyone else stunk that series. That wasn't LeBron. LeBron was awesome in that series. But there was nothing he could do because everyone else was dead. Wade was out of gas. Bosh was even playing by that point. No, he still was, but he was kind of out of gas. Battier, the end of his run. Ray Allen, end of his run. Like, those guys were done. But LeBron had figured it out, and you see that when he gets to Cleveland, 2015, 2016, obviously they win the championship. So, you just see that greatness where in the big moments, he's coming through. And Steph has reached that level. Steph has had that final, it's like when you beat the final boss in a video game. Like, Steph is the boss now. He is the captain now. And that's what's going to make this series, by the way, so much fun, is you're going to have two of those dudes going at it. I will say, I know this is going to hurt your soul because you're a massive LeBron fan.
Don't
we have
do it.
finally seen the start of LeBron aging, which it's about time that he started aging. He's 40 or 39, whatever he is. He's been playing for 20 years. And I think Steph is still at maximum capacity. And I think, honestly, that might be the difference in the series. Like, obviously, there's going to be role players that play a big factor. But when it comes down to that time where the absolute cream rises, I, at this point, trust Steph to have it in him on a level that, for literally the first time in about 17 years, I can't say I trust LeBron to get there. And that makes AD the wild card because, like, AD can have those moments, but he doesn't have them with the consistency of the level of greatness that we're talking about.
And AD is chasing what you just said. Steph has finally figured out. And I think really Steph figured it out last year during the finals run. I think him winning the finals last year is probably the best thing for his career because I do, and this is me, taking my LeBron bias out of this situation. I do give the Warriors a slight edge just because of the run that Steph Curry is on. And, the Warriors are back to, figuring out. They're almost, the team that they were in 2015. Yes, you have different role players, but Draymond, Clay, and Steph.
Well, the thing with the 2015 team was their depth was outrageous. Jordan Poole's got to get his head out of his behind and figure it out.
Inconsistent.
But here's the thing: in the regular season, Steph, Clay, Draymond, Wiggins, Looney, best 5-man lineup in the NBA. Points per 100 possessions, they outscored their opponents more than anyone else who played. I think I did it today, even 500 minutes together. They were, of regular lineups that played, they were the best. And it wasn't, I won't say it wasn't close, but the gap between them and the Nuggets starters was not insignificant. So they're special. Let me say this about the Kings real quick, and then we will get to whether Steph Curry is a top 10 all-time NBA player. De'Aaron Fox is that dude.
Yep.
He is it. He will... If he gets with the right best player, he is ready to be a 1B on a championship team yesterday. He's that good. He's that mentally made up correct. We are going to find out if Domas Sabonis is worth anything next season because the way he wilted, and even, I know Draymond made a big deal out of it, but, not shaking hands after a series like that, to me, it tells me a little bit about your character competitively. Right? Doesn't mean you're going to go and knock a grandma over in a crosswalk. That's not what I'm saying about his character. But it tells me something about your competitive character. And his sourness about this series tells me something about him if he does not then turn it around into bouncing back, maturing and growing and becoming better. Because he got his ass kicked by Kevon Looney yesterday. And the fear that he had of taking and making jump shots, the fact that the Warriors just straight up disrespected him and he didn't take that as okay, and drop 35 points a game, just hit an 18-foot jumper after 18-foot jumper. Hey, buddy, you better be practicing that 18-foot jumper and get in three-point range this offseason because you're going to need it. All right. Honestly, Anthony, with where we are on the clock, let's just dive right into it.
Let's get it.
Is Stephen Curry a top 10 all-time NBA player? Here's the case for Curry. And then we'll come up with actual names and lists, etc. 1, undisputed, he is the best shooter ever. He is the most accomplished. He is the one that you would say is the best at it based off the eye test, the whole thing. By the numbers, he's made 118 more threes, not 118 threes, 118 more threes in the playoffs than anyone else, and has done it at a 39.9% clip. That is 5th all-time amongst players who have shot 400 threes. If you make that number 700 in terms of attempts, you filter out a couple of other guys. He's 3rd by less than 1% behind Klay Thompson and Ray Allen. And Steph is doing it while shooting about 10 threes a game in the playoffs. He's the all-time leader overall in makes and is 2nd behind Kyle Korver in percentage amongst guys who have taken over 5,000 career threes, which still leaves most of anybody in the modern era who has been a semi-volume three-point shooter on the table. And, by the way, if you just hit sort by three-point percentage of anyone who's ever taken a three-pointer in the NBA, he is 119th all-time in percentage. And that includes guys, I don't know why this name stuck out to me, but Eddie Curry, who shot and made 1 three-pointer in their career. There's a list of 25 guys or so that are 1 for 1 in their career, and that counts. Even if you count all those dudes, you count Pete Maravich, who went 12 of 15 or something, or 10 of 15 in his career, right? Anyone who's ever taken a three-pointer in the NBA, he is still, as the all-time leader in attempts, 119th in percentage, which is somehow crazier than the 2nd behind Kyle Korver once you filter out all the low-volume shooters. He's been the best player on multiple championship teams, even if you think KD was better when they won in 17 and 18. I did a bunch of number crunching on his prime, which I'm going to count from 2014 to 2023, so that's a 9-season prime. He's averaging 26.9 points per game, 6.9 assists per game, 5 rebounds a game, has won 4 championships, 2 MVPs, and he did it while shooting 47% from the field, 43% from 3, 91% from the line, a.k.a. almost a 50-40-90 for 9 seasons consecutively. He averaged, if you like advanced stats, 25.9 PER during that stretch. And over that 9-year period, the Warriors have outscored their opponents by 12.1 points per 100 possessions with him on the floor and are on average 14.6 points per 100 possessions better with him on the floor than off it. So that shows you how much he affects winning. They trounce teams when he's on the floor, and the second he comes off, there is a wild swing in the other direction. So it's not like of course he's played with other guys, but it's important to realize how much he is elevating the Clays, the Draymonds, etc. And then there's this one, Anthony, which kind of to me seals this whole argument. Since 2015, when they won their first finals, they went to their first finals. They have won double the amount of championships as a lost playoff series. And in that time, he has lost 0 playoff series in the Western Conference. They lost in 16 to the Cavs because Draymond punched LeBron in the nuts, and then LeBron and Kyrie went absolutely bonkers in Game 6 and 7. All-time great stuff. That's what it took to beat him in 16. And then in 2019, obviously, KD misses most of that series and then ultimately plays 12 minutes before popping his Achilles. Clay goes down in Game 6, which they probably would have won if Clay doesn't get hurt because Clay was on fire in that game, and they lose to the Raptors in 6 games. What he has done, he's only lost 4 playoff series all time. So he's got 4 rings and 4 playoff series losses. Greatness, impact on the game. He's generationally impacted the game. And to me, the thing that matters the most is winning. And this dude has won as much as any player in the last 20 years, including LeBron James, who, when I make my list, is at number 1 as the greatest player of all time. So, to answer the question without any further ado, is Steph Curry a top 10 all-time NBA player? I was stunned as I made this list, and it went from a thought exercise to a list, at how easily the answer is yes.
I agree, Craig. He's top 10. I would say he's the best point guard ever. And yes, he does rank up against, the Magics, the Isaiah Thomases of the world. But I think when it's all said and done, when he retires, I think he will go down as the greatest point guard ever. And yes, he has crocked my top 10. I don't know if he's in my top 5, but as you've already pointed out, generational talent, the fact that he impacts winning so much, it's just, he's a winner at the end of the day also.
He now has all these clutch performances.
Yep.
He has so many signature moments. I mean, the Mike Breen triple bang.
Yep.
Curry, bang, bang,
revolutionized
bang.
the game.
He literally changed the game. And by the way, how often do we see people revolutionize the game and then the next wave comes and they're better at it than the original?
Yep.
There ain't nobody that's better than Steph at the Steph stuff. Like Trae Young is phenomenal, right? Dame is phenomenal.
Yeah.
All these guys that are either Steph's peers or coming up in this generation, phenomenal. I mean, even his impact, frankly, in the sport overall, right? Like the women's game, and someone like Caitlin Clark, Paige Beckers, what they're doing at the college level, and you're starting to see infiltrate the WNBA game. Like Steph literally changed how they play basketball all over the world, no matter who is dribbling. Like, that is incredible. But even if you take out that and just be like, okay, let's look at the resume. 4-time champion, 2-time MVP. He was the first unanimous ever MVP, which is more the fault of voters for not doing a lot of obvious MVPs before that. But, okay, he was the guy that finally broke through. I think the harder question is he top 5 versus is he top 10? Like, we are getting into that kind of category. And I think depending on what happens the next couple of years, if he wins 1 or 2 more championships, we are now talking about him like in the tier with LeBron and MJ. Like he's all of a sudden like knocking at Mount Rushmore.
Yep.
Like that, I don't think people realize that.
I agree. I think if Steph goes out and wins 1 or 2 more NBA Finals, I think undoubtedly. But I think the 2 NBA Finals that he got with Kevin Durant will sort of kind of serve as a blemish to an extent, just because he had, a fellow top 3 player on your team, and he was the guy.
Sure, but like Durant, Steph made the Durant thing work. It wasn't working initially. Yeah. And Steph kind of called everybody together and went, with Steve Kerr and Draymond and KD, and like he was the one who made it work. And there's the other thing too. Steph's personality. He is one of the easiest guys to play with in the history of the sport, both because of his skills and the way the ball moves and the way he encourages body movement. And like the system helps with all of that. But it works because Steph has a humility about him that allows other players to shine.
Yep.
And like that's why KD won with that team. And look, part of the reason Durant is not in my top 10 and barely makes my top 15 if he does, I didn't actually get that far in the list, is because he hasn't won without Steph. Like,
exactly.
We talk about how you affect winning. Like, Steph plus KD is greatest team maybe any of us have ever seen.
It ain't fair.
Steph without KD, still a champion.
Really
KD
good.
without Steph, even with Russell Westbrook and a lot of other really good players in OKC, with Kyrie in Brooklyn, like all these different iterations, and we'll see about this year in Phoenix, hadn't won without him.
Yep.
And you know, when we're talking about this level of greatness, that matters. Although I would say, like, when people ask me who are some of the greatest basketball players that you've ever seen, obviously Kevin Durant
most talented though.
Yeah, like is right there on my list, and is a guy who should have more titles if he had, you know, had some better luck and frankly not played against Steph Curry.
Yep.
Right? All right. Real quick, the actual list. I always, when I do this, I reference Bill Simmons' Book of Basketball, and then he did an updated version in 2020. His updated version in 2020 is MJ, LeBron, Bill Russell, Kareem, Magic, Bird, Wilt, Duncan, Kobe, Jerry, West, Oscar, Hakeem, Shaq, Moses, Durant, Havlicek, Nowitzki, Elgin Baylor, Julius Erving, Bob Pettit, Karl Malone, Barkley, Cousy, Steph Curry, and then KG was 25. Obviously, Curry since then skyrocketed up the list. Anthony, my list is this, and I'm not married necessarily to any of this, but this is the way I feel today. LeBron is 1, MJ 2, and I just give the nod to LeBron on longevity, the fact that we're 20 years in and he's still doing this, where MJ obviously had the gap in the middle of his career and didn't play nearly as long. I would have no problem with someone saying Jordan's better than LeBron. It's not a fight that I really like picking. Russell, I have as 3. Kareem 4. I really struggled then. Magic or Steph. But that's where Steph enters this equation for me. He's either 5 or 6. I went ahead and stuck Magic at 5 still. Steph 6. Bird 7. Duncan 8. Wilt 9. And then I would hear arguments for Shaq, Kobe, Oscar, Jerry West at 10. I would probably go with Shaq.
Whew. Man, would you like my list?
Real quick, your very young man's list.
All right, here we go. We got Bron first, of course. Michael Jordan 2. I have Magic 3 on my list. Then I have Kareem, then Shaq, then Bird, Kobe, Wilt, Tim Duncan, and then Steph Curry. Again, if Steph Curry goes out and wins another ring or 2, he definitely will move up past a couple of guys. No question. Top 5.
Kobe being above Steph is a travesty. That's the comment the internet's going to get mad about, but like that's honestly kind of a joke.
I mean, the thing is, Kobe has gone out there and been able to win on his own. Like, he didn't necessarily need Shaq. Yes, you had a great player in Pau Gasol. You had good other role players in Ron Artest, Derek Fisher. But he was the catalyst and leader of that team. Like, he didn't have as much help as Steph Curry.
Sure. I mean, no, like not quite as much. No, Pau is a Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
But also the thing for me is Kobe, and this is even putting aside all the off the court stuff. This is purely an on court argument. You talk about the personality and demeanor stuff. This is also why I have Duncan ahead of Kobe. Like the ability to keep a team together and play and be great over time has to do with how you are as a teammate. And Kobe evolved in that space, which allowed him to work better with Pau and like kind of have that second wave of championships. But in the middle there, like he missed the playoffs. Curry missed the playoffs because he was hurt. But like Duncan won 50 games a year for like 15 straight years or something ridiculous.
But he also missed the playoffs 2 years ago too. He had a chance, lost in a bubble. I mean,
he
not
was
the
still
bubble,
coming.
not the bubble.
Yeah. He was that was 1 year, but the playing game. But like he missed a lot of that year, and also the rest of his team was hurt. Like the only reason they were in the playing game is because he came back.
Yep.
and he had missed. I mean, he played for like 2 months that year.
Yeah.
So, but what if he's in the playoffs? He hasn't lost.
Yeah.
So there's that. All right, that's our list. Curry, top 10 player for sure. Question is really top 5. I think Yates has him in his top 5. Clint Yates will join us to talk about this tomorrow here on the Hoffman Show. When we get back, real things, real people said into real microphones here on the Team 980.
This is DC's.
It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always alive as well on the free Odyssey app. Wrapping up the show, Anthony, let me just see if Twitter's freaking out, right? I mean, Twitter's freaking out because apparently Twitter's just having a day.
It is, man. It is.
But nobody freaking out about saying Steph Curry's a top 10 NBA all-time NBA player. I just think I'm excited for the comment section on that one.
The crazy thing is, so like I want to say a year ago, when I was with Travis, we were having a conversation about Steph Curry versus Allen Iverson, and everyone just kept on saying Allen Iverson is so much better than Steph Curry, and I was like, okay, like when I tell you that conversation dominated the entire station from like 9 a.m. to like 6 p.m. It was crazy. It was crazy.
Please tell me Travis did not say AI.
No, Travis said. I want to say he was in agreement with me.
I'd hope so, because if not, I'm going to lose respect for Travis. Like, again, part of me hates these conversations because you wind up like disrespecting players. There's nothing disrespectful about not being as good at basketball as Stephen Curry. Like, there's just not. He's incredible. He's one of the 10 best players ever. I do think, though, like the tiers thing is far better. Like we were talking before the show, like your lack of respect for Bill Russell is appalling. But like Russell to me is in the top tier because he was so thoroughly, like, yes, there was a smaller league. There's a lot of reasons why he was able to win 11 championships. But his record in Game 7s, the numbers he put up, like everything, he was so thoroughly dominant that he belongs as in the list of like most dominant, best players of all time in terms of winning. LeBron deserves to be in that top tier. MJ, that top tier. And what Curry is doing, if he were to mess around and win another title, I think is pushing him towards that tier.
Scary.
And I think that's the more interesting conversation than like arbitrary 1 through 10 rankings. Like, what tier is he in? He, I think, has already, and in part, like I know it's a first round series, but like scoring 50 in Game 7 on the road, like does something. Like that Magic Bird tier, that tier that's below MJ, LeBron, Russell, like Steph is knocking on the door, if not already taking a seat in the back of the room of that tier. And I think there are people whose opinion I respect who would say, oh no, he's in the front of the room at that tier. And that's the kind of player that we're talking about. And I hope people appreciate it. Because also, like, the way he's grown defensively, the way he rebounds at his size, like, he's just such a good player beyond the fact that he's the greatest shooter ever, which is already enough to make him a Hall of Famer. All right, let's wrap up the show, shall we? It's time for real things. Real people set into real microphones.
Real things.
We're not going to be sucked this year.
Real people.
5 and 11. Not very good.
Set into real microphones.
You know, the culture is actually damn good.
All right, post-draft press conferences always have all kinds of goodies. Brandon Beane of the Buffalo Bills, their general manager, was asked about adding more veterans, and he was a little perturbed by the answer, or the question, because it's like, you can't just go sign good players for $2 million. They're not hanging out there, which the reporters then decided to have a little bit of fun with.
So, I'm not sure who you're talking about, but whoever it is, they got to be willing to play for about $2 million. So if you find a good one, let me know.
I will. I said if you find a good one. You don't qualify. Are you playing for the Little Sisters?
That was directed at our friend Catherine Fitzgerald, who was on the show back in the spring. I think she's playing some pickup football. Apparently not quite ready for the NFL level. Darn. This one you probably heard. Do we have time for the Deuce Vaughn one? I think we do. This one you probably heard, but it's so good. In case you haven't, Deuce Vaughn, Kansas State. His dad, assistant college director for the Cowboys, and this was the moment he got drafted by his dad's team.
Hey, buddy. How's it going? Hey, it's going good. This is Dad. My phone wasn't working. Look at here, man. You want to come to work with me next week? I wouldn't mind that. I got somebody want to speak to you. I got somebody want to speak to you.
I don't know when I've been speaking for everybody that's really in the heart of the Dallas Cowboys is standing here with a tear in our eye. We're so happy to have you on the Dallas Cowboys.
I can't thank you enough.
Well, what I really want to say, you earned every ounce of me being able to make this call.
I think that's good enough that even a Commanders fan's heart melts a little bit. You gotta love it. You gotta love it. Congrats to Deuce Vaughn and his dad on a dream come true, and to everybody prospect-wise whose dream came true this weekend.
Daniel Snyder has agreed to sell the Washington Commanders.
We're gonna have a good time tonight.
Celebrate